that that looks like with the spine. And again, we're going to be correcting. So this can be used primarily for a anteriority, although sometimes you can use it to correct, posteriorities if you put more pressure on one side than the other. That just looks better. So, as we discussed in class, because of the way that you use this technique, you have to be careful about ribcage circumstances like calcified costal cartilages, osteoporosis, and those kind of things, because your correction is going to be made kind of indirectly through the ribcage. So this hand is going to come around like this, and you can also use the same side, and I'll describe that a little bit later. But generally speaking, you come around this way. And then when I make my correction, it's my sternum over the patient's arms, which are kind of across their chest like this, so it's their elbows, which are kind of together, the sternum. And so you want to have kind of my center of gravity over the person's center of gravity to make the correction. Okay? In the sequential version, when this is done, I come down, bring the patient up, go down, bring the patient up, go down, bring the patient up, and go down. So I'm able to do it kind of in rapid fire as opposed to single fire, which means I have to kind of reposition and correct. So it's a little bit slower. God bless you. But sometimes that's what you might want to do if you just want to do one particular level. But the sequential allows you to do pretty much the entire thoracic area. Once you also, even though you're using your hand like this to make the correction, after you've done it once, it's like, how many times can you sit there and whomp on somebody, right? So if you're going to practice just the technique, you can just use an open hand and put the spine's processes kind of on the thenar eminence, hypothenar eminence, so that you can continue to kind of practice how you do the movement, but not have full fist be back there, okay? So, you can take that out. I just put that down there because this thing doesn't rip.
Is there a time when you really want to use the fist, or you can just always use the flat?
You want to use the fist, unless for some reason somebody might have a significant kyphosis. Maybe they're a little bit older. They can't take it. And then you can do that, as an alternate. But, I guess probably 90, 95% of the time I use the fist. Okay, so you're going to want to have the patient bring their arms up, pull them up a little bit, which helps to get the scapula out of the way of the T-spine. And then they're going to hug themselves. And so this hand, when I make this correction in this technique, this is the hand that's going to reach around. So you want to look at it like the hand that reaches around. It's that side that the hand is on top, or the arm is on top, the extremity is on top. Yep. If I was to do a technique where I came in from this side, the same side, then I would reposition his arms like that. Okay, just kind of facilitates the technique. So the idea would be that, again, my sternum is going to be over his elbows, over his rib cage, over his T-spine, over my hand, and that's where you get that kind of center of gravity over center of gravity. One of the things that I recommend when you set somebody's hands up like this, have it so that one upper extremity is all the way over the other extremity. Because, for example, if his hand goes like this, that takes up a little bit of space and has a propensity to bring this up a little bit more. And I think I told you in class, I did this on somebody and I separated a rib. Hurt terribly. Like I was ready to pass out from the pain kind of a thing. And
it hurt you?
Yeah, it hurt me. Yeah, I separated my rib. And so I realized you don't want to get stuck with the olecranon.
Yeah.
So when you do these techniques, you want to be able to push it down so it's more like the lateral epicondyles, not the olecranons that you make your contact with, okay? So you want to take stuff out of your pocket so you don't poke them in the eye. They don't like that. And also they should have their glasses off. They're wearing glasses.
Well,
so in the context of the sequential model, which I'll show you first, and I'm going to come around to reach from this side, I'm going to ask the patient, first of all, to lift their head. So when he lifts their head, I'm able to hold it, and then I can reach around and then put his back of his head in my crook of my elbow, and then I'm holding his shoulder ball. I don't want to have my hand like this where he goes back into extension. I want to have control so I can make more flexion, because that helps to open up, particularly that cervical thoracic area. Okay, so that's how that looks to get the head that way, and then lift up again. And then I'm going to lift him up a little bit so that I can reach back around and palpate the spinous processes. So I can say, there they are. I'm going to make my fist. I'll take my slack to the head. And then I'm going to take my sternum, and I'm going to come ahead a little bit and then slide back like this. Did you see how I did that with my body? Which takes this and makes it go like that. You all understand that? All right. There's also a modification of this technique for females. To some degree, men don't have as much hardware to worry about. But the second technique, the sequential, you're going to actually put your hand on top of their elbows, and so then you're going to put your sternum on top of your hand. So if you're concerned about, your breast contacting it, this could be a little bit, there's less contact. And Shashag might be able to show you one of the other techniques that, although she doesn't really use it, but one of the other TAs kind of described the way to kind of, do that so that you don't squish your breasts, because you don't want to do that either. So anyway, lift your head up, hold it like that, palpate, find it. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll over. You can see how I'm rolling over on him. And then my sternum is over his elbows, is over my fist. And then when I do that, I can come down and make a thrust, lift up, down, again.
Oh my
down,
gosh.
Down, down. Sweet.
Were we hearing my cracking?
So,
I totally thought he was
yeah,
cracking.
so I started at the top and I went down, which is better than starting at the bottom and going up because you have to lift the person up more. The advantage of this technique, and you notice when I had him lower, I kept him up in the C curve. That way I can get the lower thoracics and sometimes the upper lumbars. So when I mentioned last week, in a prone position, it's hard to do that prone thrust in the in the thoracic lumbar area. Remember I mentioned that? So this is an alternate. Again, it could be potentially an off-label use. But if somebody has that, it hurts like T10, T11, T12, and this doesn't like that prone correction, you can do an anterior correction and still get a release. Okay? So you all understand that particular choreography? Kind of? Good. All right. So the next one is to show you how to do it segmentally, which means one vertebra at a time. So in this case, he's still going to, bring his arms like that to give himself a hug. So in this case, I'm going to put my forearm over his humerus. I can roll him to the side. Come back here, palpate, find the particular level that I want to correct, right? Make my fist, take my slack, go upwards, roll him over. Then I'm going to put my, my hand, my palm on his elbows. And I'm just going to do an open hand now so I don't have to sit here and squish my fist together. Then put my sternum on top of my fist or hand, which is on top of his elbows. And then do the same thing and just kind of use a body drop to go down and make that correction. And so then if I was to do a different level, I would have to reset him up. And so if I wanted to do the same side, because as you notice, when I have to lean over like this, I have to kind of lean over the table a fair amount. I'm a little bit taller, so that kind of helps me. If you happen to have short arm syndrome or short person syndrome, it might be difficult to reach around. So you can do the alternate, which is to come from the ipsilateral side. So I can have him change his arm position. And in this case, roll them over, find the level, set up, come back, and then correct like this. So I don't have to do as much leaning over the table. So it accommodates it a little bit more easily for you if you have a larger, like a person who might have a barrel chest, or just as a big person. There's a gentleman that I've seen at the clinic on occasion. He's like somewhere between 400 and 500 pounds. And he comes in and he complains about thoracic pain and lumbosacral. And I can't do this on him. The dude's just like too big. So I just do the prone stuff. And, hope it all goes well. And like that. So sometimes, based on the size of the person, you just can't do it. But this is an alternate to allow you to accommodate for your size, their size, to be able to do this particular correction for the anterior thoracic. Which is going to be very, very similar in some respects to when we do the ribs, which will happen, next. But, is there anything weird?